Ahojte moji milí druháci. Tak ako po minulé týždne, aj teraz vám nahrávam hodinu dopredu. Takže chcem vás privítať na ďalšej hodine. Samozrejme signál je slabý, takže tak ako vtedy tiež som toto video nahral na YouTube, aby ste si ho mohli pozrieť na hodine. Ja som samozrejme na hodine s vami. Tak ako minule tradične, nezabudnite mi odpovedať na otázku, ktorú máte pod linkom a samozrejme ja vám na to reagujem, píšem, takže môžete sa samozrejme čokoľvek pýtať, ak nerozumiete alebo vám nie je jasné. Dobre, my pôjdeme ďalej, ja samozrejme nahrávam dopredu, ja mám ešte pondelok, ale vy máte útorok alebo štvrtok, takže nezabudnite kvôli tej absencii odpovedať. No. Čo ďalšie nezabudnite, decká, je pracovať, už sa nám to pekne tak rozbieha na vašich zadaniach, ktoré som vám kázal teda už priebežne robiť, máte ich teda zavesené aj v PDF-ku, aj vo Worde. No a v podstate my dnes pôjdeme to, čo sme už robili, tie staroveké civilizácie v tabuľke, staroveké Grécko, vidíte, že tam je toho riadne veľa, čiže treba si to pekne rozložiť, aby ste si to stihli všetko prečítať a vypísať, niektoré tie úlohy, slepé mapy, alebo vypísať len tú mytológiu, takže tak. No my pôjdeme na Ancient Rome, no a je to v podstate také veľmi jednoduché zadanie, ktoré aj na hodine vám niekedy možno stačí sledovať a mali by ste to v podstate zvládnuť. No samozrejme video je nahraté, takže najmenší problém je si to pustiť znovu a dopísať čo treba a po prípade si ešte nejaké veci vyhľadať. Ja pozerám, že som tu ešte nejaké veci aj tak zavolal ako Vexillum alebo Premia. Dobre, super. Ja nevadí, ja si to aj tak doplním. A ja to doplním asi aj hneď, aby som nezabudol. No a ako môžete vidieť, tak ja som Rímanov spravil posledný, včera večer som to dokončil. Som vás spracoval vo forme prezentácie. No a hneď si dopíšem aj military práve tieto dve veci. No a tu si dáme práve toto slovo. Ja to samozrejme, to čo je po latinsky, tak vám píšem takto. No a druhé sme mali ešte Vexillum, že som vám hodil, takže dáme si ho aj sem, ale tiež dáme do Ctrl-I, pretože je to samozrejme iný jazyk. Dobre, takže tak. Dobre, dúfam, že to bude všetko fungovať pekne. No, myslím, že tam nie je žiadny problém s týmto, čiže máte to o čosi ľahšie. Samozrejme ďalšie zadanie, potom vám určite dám také pestrejšie, že s kreslením a možno pozeraním nejaké videjka a tak ďalej. Dobre, I think we can actually start. We can just start, so I can close this PDF form and we can start with presentation, why not? So, the ancient Rome, this is our next topic. Okay, fine, now it's working. So, what to say about ancient Rome? Of course, first we need some books to study for you. There are, of course, books, as always, that we have at school. Maybe you can miss them these days if you need to study more, but I hope I provide you with enough information. So when we are back at school and you miss some books like this, so just ask me and we can distribute them. Of course, for me, I use like plenty of resources that would be incredible long list of them. So for them, of course, Wikipedia, all the facts I check is from there. Google Images especially, and YouTube videos, of course. In case there are some others like about movies like CCFD or IMDb about movies, so that's a bit different. Of course, things that I know from university, for example. Let's start. As for every country and every historical period, we need to set them in place and time. And still, we have to talk about geography and ethnicity as always. Of course, this is easy for us because Italian peninsula or the Epinine Peninsula, Apeninský polostrov alebo Italia. Don't confuse it with Taliansko, with Italy itself, because country that came to exist like in 1860s and 1870s, this Risorgimento. But this peninsula was a bit different, and also with its specific terrain, it provided different things that Greeks had, for example. So what was the difference? First, whole peninsula is actually like a big boot in the sea, so it gives you great actually position for sailing around, for fishing, for protection, but on the other hand open from like sea invasions. And if Italy was invaded, it's being invaded very often, it was along the coast and across the some like these narrow paths. This is actually the only path that is not so hilly, but still you have to cross it from these lands from Carpathian Basin. Okay, so this is one thing. Of course, they look at it as it is their own country. The other thing is that Italy, together with France, have Mont Blanc, the highest peak in Europe, with 48, I believe, or 48 to 84. I'm not sure about the altitude of Mont Blanc, but the point is that from these places around Monaco, you have like immediately high peaks going like to Slovenia, to Istria. So it's great protection from the north, despite, of course, for centuries people are crossing. Among them, Ötzi was found somewhere here, I believe. Okay. Uh, so this is one thing. The other thing, that mountains are also inside. They are the Epinine Mountains, and in some places they are on the level of our Velika Fatra, so like 1500s meters about, and they provide actually a lot of resources like metals, iron, for example, gold, silver too. Not as much as in Carpathians, our lands, but pretty enough for like civilization like this. The other thing is that during the history, you will see that the Romans sailed and actually occupied and overall all the lands on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. And in the times of imperial Rome, Císarsky Rím, they call it the Mare Nostrum. In Latin, I promise you to teach some Latin. Mare, sea, more, nostrum, ours, nostra. Okay, so Mare Nostrum was actually their name for Mediterranean Sea. That it is ours, it belongs to us. Despite seas around Ionian Sea, Adriatic Sea, Tyrrhenian Sea, so it's a bit different, and this part is like Mediterranean one. Still, they had to be excellent navigators, like Morepalci. So this is the point. Okay, what else? Of course, for them it was important to have and keep some islands around, and that belong to Italy. Very powerful, very important. You cannot see me because it doesn't work. This my key tab doesn't work, but I can see Sicily in here, and here this is volcano. This is volcano Etna, and from the ashes, volcanic ashes around Sicily is covered with very fertile soil with this volcanic ash, but it contains a lot of organic stuff, and thanks to this, Sicily is actually one of the highest productive regions for planting wheat and crops. So that's why it was kind of a barn for Italy and for Roman Empire. So that was also a place with the highest number of slaves working in the fields and plantations and so on. Other islands like Sardinia, Corsica, around there, plenty of them. Of course, other countries will learn about them. So this is actually setting also the ethnicity in here, and this is something that you have in here. Again, you cannot see. I should have remembered this, that my face is still here, but the point is, so what were these people living in here? They were Indo-Europeans. All of the tribes in here were Indo-Europeans, but of course during the centuries of this Neolithic, Analytic and Bronze Age period evolution, within the Iron Age that we are in here at the beginning of Iron Age, we have these groups. Actually, we can divide them in central, north, and south. In central part that we need to talk about in central Italia is the place or region called Latium. You may know Lazio Roma football club, and it's named according to the tribe called Latins, the Latinovia. They were not the only guys living in here, because there were, for example, Samnites, Sabines, and many others, and together they were actually pretty similar. So that's why we start to talk about them like as about Italic tribes, či Italikovia, Italické kmene. And Latins were one of them, and also language, Latin is called according to them. But themselves, they didn't call Latins when they established the city, and they called themselves according to the city they had and possessed. That's why we talk about Romans. During the history, especially during the times of Republic, Romans or Latins defeated other Italic tribes, but also whole Italia, and this is what Romans came to be with Latin language. Okay. In the north of Italia, north of this Latium, you can see there was a region called Atroria, and it was according to the nation, very interesting ancient nation of Etruscans who were living here, and they had a highly developed civilization even before Romans came to be. They are pretty like enigmatic, like mysterious, because we can't translate their writing script, so it led many nations to claim that we were there. Actually, I saw books where some crazy Slovak, not archaeologist of course, but some, I don't know who was he. He claimed that Etruscans were Slovaks, of course. Actually, Hungarians are pretty sure that they can compare it, but these are like fake history and these hoaxes. So keep it in mind that sometimes, despite something that is mysterious, so it doesn't mean that we can like track that we are or something that we want to be, that it's possible. Actually, Etruscans were really cool, really interesting. They had the like highly developed civilization that I also uploaded a video for you. But you can actually Google and find some more of them. We'll see what is the
and was roughly equivalent to Athena.
okay. Yeah. So about the
It was from
civilization,
relatively
how
low
they adopted many things in here. Um, Actually, this is Invicta, Kings and
to
Generals,
Rome.
one of many like
Politically,
this
the Etruscans were always a divided kingdom.
animated
Much like the ancient
videos
Greek
about their
to their
civilization,
Greco-Roman counterpart,
how they lived, who were they, and so on. Actually, many things
he has the
Romans
King
adopted
of Rome,
from them.
known to his
Uh,
people as
I would
Nicholas
really
Tarquinius
point, but I don't think I got
Piso,
it in
as
here.
the
But maybe
Romans
this
began
would be,
in 264
or maybe
BC.
this is when I see this
Etruscans did not
architecture vault.
disappear
This
overnight.
was typical for them.
Their
Yeah, they were
people,
talking
culture,
about
and
this.
language
So this was
survived for
something that the
another
Romans took over,
300
and
years
Greeks
under
didn't
Roman
use it,
rule.
didn't have it.
However, following the
Also, the
social
last kings of
war of
Rome were
90
from of
BC,
this Etruscan
Etruscan
origin.
cities
But if
within the
you actually
Republic gained full Roman
look at
citizenship,
this, so you can
and
see
this
many of these
expedited their
guys, but
assimilation
you
into
have to be
Latin
really sure
society.
whether
And
these
by
guys are
around
not
30
pushing that
AD,
who
the
were
Etruscan language
they
had gone
and
extinct,
invent some
ending a
history,
culture that had
some
endured for
making
nearly
out some like dreaming
1,500 years.
beliefs. Okay, Etruscans in here. Not only Etruscans, not of them. When you see River Po, the Pád, po slovensky rieka Pád. So these guys, these territories were settled by other these Etruscan tribes and maybe of Illyrians. Uh, Today, Illyrians are in only one nation, and that's Albania, down in the south, just opposite to this Italian coast. But at the time, they're living in these parts. But during this Celtic expansion that we had at the prehistory topic, so they invaded also. They crossed the Alps and actually occupied this River Po basin. They also destroyed many things. Actually, they actually plundered Rome in like 4th century before Christ or BCE, and there are some like famous stories like that only Capitol, the like the main fortress Acropolis of Rome, was not conquered because they got sacred geese. Geese, they were sacred animals, protecting them. They belonged like sacred animals to the goddess and Juno, and like when Celts, these Gauls were climbing to the top of the capital, so they started to squeak and they woke up Roman soldiers who defended the last stand of Romans. Okay, but we talked a lot about them, but these were in the north. So actually, Etruscans were the guys. From Gauls, they adopted a couple of deities. Epona, goddess with horse, and goddess of springs and water streams, was like really favorite, but not so much. But we'll talk about this later. In the south of Italy, from Naples down to Calabria and to Sicily itself, again, you cannot see it. So there were Greeks living. You remember that the Greeks colonized. If I ask you the question that when it was, so you should be able to remember that was in archaic period, so approximately between like 7th and 5th century BC. They settled in here, and you know that even Athenians actually they lost their Peloponnesian War because they made this expedition to Sicily, and they provided enough food for not only Italy but even for Greece themselves. Actually, Romans had to fight them. I will mention King Pyrrhus, the Pyrrhic victory, that during times of Hellenistic Greek kingdoms, Romans clashed with them. And the other was this violet color, and these guys were called by Romans as Puns. But we know, remember, I told you also about Phoenicia, well, this very clever, small nation in Lebanon, who sailed and also established colonies. Were founding colonies just like Greeks, and these guys established very important big city of Carthage or Carthage. Sometimes this weird English pronunciation is used, and they at the time they created kind of like naval empire, and also you cannot see, but later you can find this map, half to half settled by Greeks and this by Puns, by Phoenicians. Uh, Having the Sicily island. And for that reason, they also clash in 3 Punic wars that I'm going to tell you about. So, what else? That's all for the beginning, I believe. I think the last picture I have is a like funeral tomb or statuary from a mound of Etruscans, and this is like 7th century before Christ, and the times when Romans were pretty like wild. Okay, how to say and how to develop how it changed from these things to the others was that we need again periodization. That is much easier than for Greeks because we have 3 basic period and one is divided in 2. So first period is the kingdom. We call it also regal period, regálne obdobie. It's from Latin word rex. Rex, it doesn't mean the dog, German shepherd of Commissar from Vienna, but rex means the king. Okay, so regal, it means like monarchy, royal. Okay, so king's period. That was pretty easy because it's from the beginning of legendary foundation of Rome by Romulus and Remus in 753 BC, when these two abandoned babies were brought up by she-wolf, that she became also the symbol of Rome. Romulus was also the first king, and there were supposed to be like 7 kings, and we'll talk about them until 510, when last kings, Etruscan king Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, was banished from Rome, and instead of this monarchy, they invented a new form of government that seems to be like democracy, and they called it res publica, the matter of public, and shortly for us, republic. And I will tell you about republic pretty in detailed way because you need to know them and compare them to understand our history and our functioning today too. Okay, this republic lasted. It's very difficult to say also which is the date, what you have to fill in, because if you had been looking for the date, sources can be really various. In my opinion, I pick up 3 that are, in my opinion, important and connected with the guy. This one guy is Julius Caesar, and this guy Octavius Augustus. These 2 guys actually brought the republic down. Guy Julius Caesar, when he overruled it as dictator and very popular dictator, but he was assassinated in 44 BC. For a couple of years, it lasted for his adoptive son and actually nephew, Octavius Augustus, to actually build up his power similar to like Caesar. Again, I will tell you everything about this. And he came to power in approximately 27 BC. When he died, he already gave his succession to the first emperor, imperator, and that was 1480. So it's difficult to say when was actually the end of republic, because even Octavius, even until like all this period of empire called the Principate, still there was Senate and many republican institutions and functions still there. So they actually pretended, that there is some republic, but it was empire. That's why how we call it. Actually, empire lasted much longer than only one period, Principate, because I asked you to write down 2 of them, and it's really big difference because approximately this year 284, Emperor Diocletian, he actually abandoned and abolished, these republican institutions. In fact, they were not important at all at that time. Still, it's very big difference is the emperor, the head of the state, calls himself princeps, in Latin meaning like the first among the equals, or the most first, the firstly, najprvejší, or dominus, lord, master. okay, like God. But actually, these guys were proclaimed. Even Octavius Augustus was proclaimed by Senate that he was a god. So can't be surprised that even already during the Principate, you had a couple of emperors that appointed his own favorite horse a senator, or having like writing a poem about burning Troy. He's ordered to set Rome on fire. So that I'm talking about Caligula and Nero as famous Claudius Julian dynasty. Okay, when we finally come to the end, 476, that's the end of Western Roman Empire, because in this period, 395, and even before and later, we have a couple of divisions of Roman Empire. That is very important to remember and to understand. Okay, let's start with first period that is called the Roman Kingdom, and it's more like legendary stuff connected with what I already told you, with a wolf, especially she-wolf, Čelučica, and his old coin, and why it is symbol of Rome. And according to the stories and their legends, she saved the founders of Rome, Romulus and Remus, who were babies according to prophecy, typical Greek style prophecy that kids or sons of your daughter who shall bring you the doom. So the king ordered to kill his grandsons, and just like in many other stories that we know, even from Snow White fairy tale, but actually all of them originate in the stories about goddess Aset and Isis from ancient Egypt, and they're transferred to many cultures later on. And these kids were not killed, but they were put in a basket in the river Tiber, and on the bank of the river, they didn't sunk, but didn't drown in the river, but they were saved by She-Wolf, who had just lost her cubs. So she started to milk them, and she saved them, and they were growing as wildlings, like Tarzan or Mowgli from Rudyard Kipling, and actually they were brought back, just like Paris in this Iliad and Odyssey stories. They survived, and actually they established their own rules. So that's the thing. Actually, it is all connected with another story, because Romans really adored this Greek culture, what I told you, and they really wanted to have some connection with ancient Greeks. And because they didn't, so they just invented a history for them and created extra legend that according to them, it had happened before Romulus and Remus. And they claimed, and it was actually Vergilius Aeneid, again you cannot see it, but Aeneid by Virgil or Vergilius, that he had a story that, the only guys who escaped from burning Troy during this Trojan War was Aeneas, who found like escape tunnel from Troy, and with his wife and kids, and carrying his old father on his back, he managed to escape from Troy. This is what Homer mentioned. But this Aeneas or Aeneida, written by Virgil, he claimed that he actually had similar adventure, just like Odyssey. So he sailed around like Mediterranean. He met with various guys, and it was really kind of copy of this of the Odyssey. And after many years, he sailed to Italia and established a couple of towns. And actually, Romulus and Remus were his like great grandsons, I believe. So they counted it like according to years. So how many years have passed since then? So Romans believe that they are like these Trojans, and they are like warlike, and also this kind of milking by wolf and being aggressive and great warriors despite losing and building their power again. It became their like real symbol. And when in one great movie that I saw, Men from the Earth, they claimed that the Roman Empire was just killing blood machine. So difficult to say, but actually they were really aggressive, and they were proud of this warriorsness. Okay, what you need to know about Roman Kingdom. If you're not going to study history at university, you don't need to remember them. But still, it's easy. The Seven Hills and Seven Kings. What happened? Romulus and Remus, they picked up, according to their legends, they picked up a place along the river Tiber that is not maybe very, how to say, that doesn't look very much like good to settle down. The reason is that there are large plains from the sea, and Rome was, today it's like closed, the Ostia, as a port of Rome is like 20 or 50 kilometers from Rome, from central part, 50, not like 20 maybe, but it's a long way to go there. And at the time, it was pretty far away. But what was there? That the river Tiber is floating along the marshes that were full of salt that survived maybe from some older period of Pleistocene, and salt became like the source of wealth for Romans and Latins in Rome. This is great advantage because they're trading it. So from these salty marshes, they were digging salt and actually selling it. So from these, they build up enough iron to have weapons and defeat their enemies. Not only this, they couldn't live in the marshes, so they built up the city itself of 7 hills or mounts. Actually, they are not even hills. The Spanish stairs in Rome, very famous square. So it's actually like small slope. But still, for them, it was enough to build this. Hill, as you can see, Capitoline Hill or Palatinate Hill, they were names that later became very, very famous, or Aventine Hill. And later on in this map, you see that how even fortification was built. But when you look around now, one Goat Marsh, for example, there was Circus Maximus that used to be Saline, again, salty marshes and river Tiber around. Legendary 7 hills, and Rome was built upon it, and they, during the kingdom, they had 7 kings in here. Who were those kings from here? Were from Romulus at the beginning, Numa Pompilius, Tullus Hostilius, Ancus Marcius. You see Latin names. Tarquin the Elder, Servius Tullius, you cannot him, very important for reforms of upcoming republic. And the last one you cannot see, Tarquin the Proud, or Tarquinius Superbus. Latin is excellent because we have plenty of Latin words in Slovak language due to the fact that Latin was our official language by 18th century and again by 1848. For a short period, there was German, then Magyar language, and so on. So Slovak belongs among outside of Romance languages. We and Hungarian, Slovak and Hungarian languages have the highest percentage of Latin vocabulary terminology in our languages. So superbus, when you are super, so it means you are above the others. So it's actually the best, better the best. And when you have ibus, it is the last part, so the most. So when you are the most superb, you are the best, the bestest, okay? The bestest ever. So it's really, even in Latin, it sounds so strange that it's like overestimated that somebody is so great. I'm like me, myself, the great, that probably he was proud. And this is Tarquinius Pupni or Tarquinius Pichni. Last two, Servius Tullius and Tarquinius Superbus, were Etruscans who overruled Rome, and people didn't like them because they're actually foreigners from other tribe, from other culture. The other thing, they tried to rule as monarchs, monarchos. Remember from Greek governments that they had rule for themselves. But even during this regal period, they already had some institutions like Senate, that was kind of parliament, or assembly of the elders who helped king to decide. And actually, they're electing kings. They didn't have, so they have elected kings. Then they use lictors. Lictors were kind of officers who were appointed not by the king, but by Senate, by this one, by these guys who had to bring these laws into practice, walking around the streets of Rome and carrying some insignia and deciding. Of course, they had some soldiers accompanied and so on. So we have this. The other thing was that Pontifex, maybe you heard about pontificate of the Pope. It's again Latin word that comes the highest priest. Of course, they had their own religion that was actually combination of this Latin, but mostly of Greek origin. So that's why all these planets in the sky we have from Jupiter, Venus. Each of them is named of a Greek god, but in Latin. So Jupiter is Zeus. Okay, Mars it's god of war, Ares. Venus is Aphrodite, goddess of love, and so on. Mercury is Hermes, the messenger of God, and so on. So this is really interesting. And Pontifex was also elected. So the guy who was the king, but he was elected, became Pontifex too. So in Rome, the one who was even elected as a main guy, so he was elected. He was not chosen I don't know, by the king himself. He had to be elected. So you see that despite it was kingdom, they had some institutions that limited the king's power somehow, or people could choose it, you know. If you're interested, it's maybe coincidence that for the story of Romulus and Remus, Hollywood or whoever, they shot two movies. First is that I've seen and called the first kill Primo Rex, you see. Primo, the first one. You can speak Latin, guys, or Italian. And it's a story of founding the Rome, but they really try to make it as this early Iron Age period, so really wild and savage and really bloody. So I'm not going to give you all the stuff to brothers. And actually, it was mostly like about how they try to survive in fighting tribes among the others and gather enough supporters, fighting in these marshes. Actually, it was shot in the countryside around Rome, so the countryside is really similar how it looked like in like 270 centuries, 7 centuries ago. Okay, Romulus and Remus. So it is really like almost like survival, survival things. And the other is Romulus is a brand new TV series that I haven't seen, so I believe it's not bad, but it looks cool. Also, despite of some unhistorical facts, but when I saw some parts of it, it really remind me like how Rome could look like in during times of its foundation of 753, and people dress like in these periods of Iron Age and so on. Okay, actually there are many commentaries and reviews, and here you had to do it too. That they should like the producers should have listened to historians much more. But I found it. Oh, poor house. Okay, so yeah, it was okay. Sorry for that, but it's history, you see too. But the point is, I believe it can be interesting also. But you see, it doesn't look very much like great empire that shall be later on. Okay, so let it be Romulus and let's move on because we have a lot of things to pass. Pozriem sa, dobre, mám nejaký 27 minút ešte. So we can move on from Roman Kingdom to Roman Republic. So let's analyze it, and I believe it may remind you these lessons about democracy, because it is similar system that how it looked like. So the basic point of this was Roman law. You have to have some law, some acts written on a code law, as the people know. In Rome, during Republic, when Tarquinius Superbus was banished, so they implemented so-called 12 tables of Roman law. We are pretty sure that it had been already before that, maybe Servius Tullius reform already divided people in two big groups, plebeians and patricians, and he gave them some privileges and the others didn't have. Republic should have been similar to this. Here in this illustration from maybe 80-90 century, these 12 tables were being displayed, exhibited outside in the Forum Romanum. Is like Agora or Square of Rome, where people could read it, and it was about basic part. So the point and the etymology of this word republic is res publica, which means the matter or the thing about public. Záležitosť doslova verejnosti, záležitosť verejná, alebo po slovensky vec verejná. As I said, it is kind of like new form of government that was kind of like democracy like. What they said that people living in Rome and Romans and citizens who are not only people themselves but also the main legislative body. So the body, I mean assembly, that gives lex. Lex, if you have heard this act in Latin. Legislative, it means giving law, giving legis. Again, so much Latin in Slovak language. And for this reason, they use popularly they use this SPQR abbreviation, which stands for Senatus et Populusque Romanus. Senatus et Populusque Romanus means the Senate and the people of Rome. populárne, niečo, že medzi ľuďmi, populus, people, okay? So this is very easy. So Senate and people of Rome, was kind of like description of all the Roman citizens they had. Still, they were divided into parts that you probably know from elementary school, and they were patricians and plebeians. Patricians, it means that you have pater. You know who's pater? Father, yes. So if you're a rich father and you inherited his ownership, land, slaves, iron mine, salt marshes, whatever, and thus becoming rich. And when you are rich, just like it was in the Salon reform, the richest guys had the biggest responsibilities, but also biggest liberties and freedoms. In this way, patricians were given the biggest right in republic. The other guys who were still citizens were actually a bit poorer, or much poorer than the others. Small farmers, still rich peasant, but not as so rich. They even could have owned some slaves, or people living in towns and craftsmen, for example. These guys were called plebs, which means plebeian, or plebeians means like commoner or lower class. Even today, když má plebejský pôd, it means that he's not from very rich family, and maybe farmers or workers, and you're not like entrepreneurs or whatever, you know. Okay, still, Rome, just like any other ancient society, had many non-citizens that, you know, and if you want to guess, okay, again, you cannot see this picture, so I shall read it for you. So Roman society had these SPQR, patricians, okay, plebeians, actually there are much more things written in here, then women. Roman women were not citizens, and slaves. Actually, I can read it for you. So patricians were noble families connected to Rome's founders, usually businessmen, large landholders, a minority of population, but early in the Republic had most political rights. Men could serve as consul, senator, or magistrate. That means judge. I will explain all of these. Plebeians, another thing. Most Romans were plebeians. They were Roman middle class, worked as farmers, traders, or craftspeople, served in the assembly, people's assembly, or concilium plebuis, which meant that they could vote on laws but not make laws, and we will talk about this. Women had limited rights. They could own property, run business, but they could not participate in the government. Consider the property of their father before marriage and their husband after marriage. So, sorry, patriarchat is still there. And slaves were not citizens, of course, had no rights. Most slaves were either prisoners of war or debtors, so the same as in Greece. Most work in agriculture, craft work, or in the homes of their owners. I can tell you that many Greeks were slaves as teachers, you know, slave teachers, imagine that. Some were freed after either buying bed, but they're freed or upon their, I can't read it, the slavers' former owner's death, for example. So it depended. So if we analyze it again back, so in this graph, very simple graph that you have also in your task, is that how many people had actually these rights. So the voters, kids, foreigners, of course, they didn't have rights, women and slaves, half of the population again. So if we can celebrate it just like democracy, republic, again, we have to compare it to the others and see that many people didn't possess rights, that it's just the beginning of the road, you know, to democracy and republic. Still, the point was that this republic had some institutions and functions that were being elected, and it is basic principle of democracy. And these institutions and functions actually checked each other, so none of them could gain complete control about the state. Actually, they could eventually, in the end, they did. So another, you will see many graphs in here. So again, citizens, patricians, and plebeians. And now non-citizens, again, I just read it for you, slaves, provincials, it means people outside of Rome, and had no right, no government. And in here, the government together was a couple of institutions I'm going to explain. First, consuls, magistrates, Senate, and Assembly of Citizens. So let's have a look at it. This picture is from the Senate, which is actually the oldest institution. And what was that? Senate was the assembly of patricians. Of course, you cannot elect all patricians, so patricians just elected senators from themselves. We can call it like higher chamber of parliament today, or let's say House of Lords in England. So if you are from a rich family, you have right to vote, and you vote some representative of your fraction, of your neighborhood, of your quarter in the city, and a representative of your opinions, for example. So that's why you can see 50, 100 depended also on the times when it was. So this is the Senate, and Senate can create laws, and not only in republic but even last kings had to accept it. So that was the thing. Senate will last for many centuries until Octavius Augustus actually overruled it, but still for 2 centuries there was Senate. But people who came there and sat there, they had to vote for the things that the emperor passed. So you'll see that was very important. But still, is it fair when we have this small part of voters and these guys had this right? Probably not. And still plebeians were like 90% of population of Rome, even much more. That's why very often, already in times of kingdom and especially in republic, plebeians were actually fighting. There were riots, there were demonstrations every time when people are in the streets, so they are angry, at least some part of population. And plebeians gradually seized permit from patricians that they can have also their own assembly, and it was very similar to something that was in Sparta and also in Athens. Remember ostracism? Remember, for example, 10,000 Spartans voting, in assembly. So the same thing was in here, that plebeians had this concilium plebuis. Again, if I have to ask you what does mean concilium, yes, it means council. Rada, zhromaždenie, assembly, plebuis of plebeians. Council of plebeians was the big gathering of all the plebeians who could meet, and they could sometimes protest against the senators. For that reason, later on, they were allowed to elect one guy, one representative for plebeians that was sitting. Maybe this is tribune of the people in here, and senators voting, and tribune as representative of plebeians. Come on, this act is against plebeians. So he could stood up. He just stood up. He could stand up, and he stood up and said veto. It doesn't mean that he needs some butter or something, but he said veto, it means I protest, I refuse, I deny it. Veto znamená vetovať, it means to deny some act, nejaký zákon. So you see, we have it too. This tribunal of the people thus became very important function. But what was the other thing? Senators were only the guys who made laws, but who brought this law into practice? From themselves, they started elected, and that was basic part of republic, two executive officers. It means guy who can bring this law into practice, even to execute the guys who break it. That's why we start to use exekutíva, exekutívna moc, alebo výkonná moc. So when you bring these laws from 12 tables of Roman law into practice, there were two consuls, so similar to Sparta, they had not one king but two kings, and these guys had two officers who were being elected for 1 year. Only for 1 year. Then there were another consuls elected. We have, different periods in presidency, for example. These consuls, even they were two, to make compromise, not to take power from themselves. So either they had to agree, make a compromise, or they checked each other from seizing, gaining ultimate, complete control. Even not to rule, not to argue too much, so they're ruling after 1 month, and they were like switching again. So for 6 months, one consul was ruling the other, but they were one by one. Okay, every second month was one consul ruling. So if you passed some law or did behave badly, so the other consul in 1 month just erased it. Okay, so even today, if you want to prepare a good law in Slovak parliament, let's say, it must be compromised, probably even with the opposition. Because why? Next, in 2-3 years, in 1 year, new government comes from new elections, and they will just abolish it. Like John Biden is, he abolished like hundreds of acts signed up by Donald Trump, because Trump did only from his persuasion. He didn't ask anybody. So obviously these laws could have been stupid or ineffective for the state, for themselves. Okay. So to prevent this, Trump obviously didn't study ancient Roman history, but this was the thing. Consuls had these many guys around themselves, who helped them with bringing the power, because they didn't kill people, but they had these lictors, they had censors, they had plenty of magistrates, officers who brought all these things into practice. I told you about the tribune of the people, so that was important. Magistrates were again elected people, officers, experts, sometimes educated people who had like plenty of functions. You will see some pictures too. And finally, dictator. Uh, Dictator was another interesting part, because if you remember, democracy was not always very effective, especially in times of danger, and when the endangerment was really fast, this Persian army, let's say. So Romans knew that probably Greeks didn't have it very effective. So in times of danger, they decided the Senate could elect and appoint one, let's say, consul or one of them, or general of Roman armies, to be the dictator. Dictator, from the word dictate, it means to tell the others what to do, and you have to do it without any hesitation, without discussion. Čiže keď máte diktát, tak nemôžete si napísať, čo chcete, okay? So that's why dictator, he actually possessed ultimate power, all the powers. He couldn't be controlled, he didn't have to ask Senate, he didn't have to listen to the tribune of the people, to anybody. And in the times of danger, he was ruling with ultimate power. But only after 6 months, until 6 months. When 6 months passed, he lost his power. Yes, of course, if the war was still on, if danger was still ongoing, so the Senate could have prolonged this dictatorship of somebody. And actually, they did it a couple of times to, let's say, Sulla or Gaius Marius, because they were either with their charisma, they persuaded there's still danger, Somebody is scaring people only to show, give me the power, I save you. But that was the things that Hitler or Stalin were doing. That's why I talked about them as about dictators, okay? That they were given power from the people, but they abused it and took it for themselves. And actually, guys, Julius Caesar, even Octavius Augustus, were given this lifetime dictatorship. And this way made them emperors, Caesar, ultimate powers. In couple of pictures we have in here, was again Senate, slaves, plebeians, and these were, for example, from consuls, and these guys are all magistrates, praetory judges who administer the Roman law, so judges, ediles, edilovia, look after particular matters of government such as public buildings, food supply, and games. I don't know, managers, I would say, call them. Questor, questori, manage financial and administrative matters. So the economists, accountants, you need them. 20 of them. Tribunes, representatives of plebeians, but that was kind of like officers of tribune of the people, was usually one. Ordinary people, slaves, and so on. And about dictator, I told you, also, some consuls could become a censor for 18 months, and censors conducted a census, head count of Rome, every 5 years. It means every 5 years there was a big census, even today, and actually in these days we starting with census, just čítanie ľudu, head count, okay? And they need to know how many people are there to set the taxes approximately to be enough to get enough money from people, but not to take them all, So this is very important, and census is actually counting how many people you have. Still, on the same way, censors had to watch out the public, let's say, permits, and for example, when somebody had like too many slaves, or they had like illegal businesses opened, so they could close it. So that's why also we can say that censors can close it, and they can punish somebody who was even talking against republic. That's why with them lictors were working and having like sticks bound together with eggs, because when censors and lictors and consuls decided this guy should be punished, they could like pull out one of the sticks and beat him, punish him. The other, if somebody really committed serious crime, so he could be executed, beheaded with the axe, and that was called, these things, this bound of rods with axe was called fasces, and became symbol of power of republic, because it is law on one side, but on the other hand even older. For that reason, also republic was not only like great democracy and freedom, but it was a lot of responsibility, but also power of some people. For many guys, positive or negative, it became really influential and important, these fasces. Again, another couple of pictures. Don't worry, I'm not going to read it all. So Senate advises consuls. Consuls had these comitia, centuriana, curiata, populi tributa, plebis with plebeians. ordinary Roman slaves, and we have these officers, aediles, praetors, censors, quaestors, and many others. So another description. This is you have, and I like it because when you read it, now you should be able to understand it. So what to say? At the beginning, you need to have people, and people are two people, patricians and plebeians. And now patricians can have senate. Senate elects two executive consuls, but plebeians have this people assembly who elect tribune of the people, and thus they can veto laws made by senates. And together they had these 20 stone tablets in Forum Romanum. Again, they have this power and clients and so on, how they ruled, and again, what they could or couldn't do. So you can just study it and analyze it. Another pyramid that is I really like say Venn diagram, maybe what they share or didn't. And again, the power: citizen, assembly, senate, tribunes, consuls in the top, 12 tables, and dictator, and why. So just read it and you have it all. And this picture from a French history book, maybe the end of 19th century, but already colorized, so showing the tribune of the people speaking to people. And maybe this guy was Julius Caesar, because many important guys and dictators started as tribune of the people, because that's the thing, that if you do your job well, and people really were happy that they elected you, you can do this. So that's why being a president, for example, in Slovakia, it's a great chance like to change things, despite you don't have any serious law, only to veto the decisions of parliament. Okay, if I had time, but maybe just answer it for yourself, or maybe for the next lesson, it's highly possible that some of you will have classes or lessons with a practitioner. My former student, Marian Stang, who was studying history just like you from 8th class, but he was also good at history, and he's studying history in Banska Bystrica right now, and they had to pass teaching practice. And he asked me if he can like participate in some lessons. So it's highly possible that next lesson after the spring holiday, maybe later on, we just like managing the dates, he will teach you. I don't know whether Facebook or YouTube or Microsoft Teams, we will see, but he may ask you maybe similar questions. I don't know, but try to think about it at least. So which are political institutions and which are political function? So institution as an organization, and function is the job you are given, okay, that you have to do. The other, match them whether they belong to legislative, executive, or judicial power in here. Legislatívna, čiže zákonodárna, executive, čiže výkonná moc, vykonávacia, and judicial znamená právna moc, súdna moc. You see that usually in republics, in democracies, these powers should be divided and they cannot overrule. If you manage to overrule all three, you can become a dictator. So that's why even today it's very important. Robert Fico, he candidated for Supreme Court, head of the Supreme Court, najvyšší súd, ústavný súd. So many things. Adolf Hitler, Stalin, they overrule all of these. In communist Czechoslovakia, let's say Antonín Novotný or Klement Gottwald, they appointed judges, just judicial. They were the prime ministers, so they led executive, and they were actually heads or chief secretaries of Communist Party, which they occupy all the party that only members of the Communist Party were sitting in the parliament. So thus he was the head of legislative, executive, and judicial power together. Perfect dictator, like in ancient Rome. Compare them to Slovak political institutions and functions, and maybe I will leave it for my task for the lesson, or maybe for some tasks, I don't know, we'll see, but try to think about it, that which of them do we have anybody in times of danger who is like the head of the military and chief commander of Slovak army in case of war or case of this martial law. And what were the fastest? Because this is something I told you about, and again I try to hide but this is one of these lictors, one of the officers accompanying censors and consuls holding these fasces, and I told you what was that and what was the meaning of it. Okay, still don't understand. So watch this, guys. I found some video from like educational video. We have great possibilities today thanks to internet, and gradually a lot of things were being done in here too. Political Structure of the Roman Republic by Jessica Whitmore. Thank you very much, Miss Teacher. and she gives you very brief and very easy explanation with nice cartoons that what was that, and I think that it's so simple that everybody should understand. Okay, with very funny, nice voice. You see you here. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Whitespoon, or whatever was your name. Sorry for that. Okay, checking the time. Okay, I got like 5 minutes to go, so let's check what would be the other part. Roman Republic with the conquest and the Punic Wars. Probably I'm going to speak much more, but what I tell you, at least what are we expecting to do is uh, what we are going to do. Sorry. Dúfam, že som si nevypol zvuk, že mi ide nahrávanie. Okay, so next lesson we'll move on what was happening in Roman Republic, especially the expansion of Italia. I mean the conquest of Rome. I mean with the conquest of Italia, because Republic started to exist still as Rome was really small city state. Actually, that was nothing more. So they led plenty of wars against other Italic tribes. So gradually they conquered the Sabines. There was actually a famous story how they had lack of women. So they attacked another tribe and they killed all their men and took their women, like they kidnapped them and so on. Then they had a lot of conflicts with Etruscans. There were kings too, Etruscan kings in Rome, but later on, Etruscans were destroyed during like approximately 4th century BC, if I remember properly. Then they had a lot of wars in the south against Greek city-states in Sicily, from Naples down to Taranto and Syracuse. You remember I told you about Archimedes, who was building these defenses of the fortification of Syracuse with mirrors and various catapults and throwing machines. Romans actually adopted many of these inventions and technology of these great Greek scientists and philosophers, and they start to use them in mass use in Roman military, which we talk about later during the next lesson. And actually, it helped them to defeat, even at the time, the best tactics and troops that were phalanxes. If you remember these Hellenistic Macedonian phalanxes, where these troops with their long spikes, spears. And in this way, when they clashed with Hellenistic armies in southern Italy and later on in Greece, so Romans were first guys who managed to defeat them. Usually it was with great training, with great tactics, with their excellent military, but also with war machines. Even when fighting a couple of times, and first time when they fought against elephants, like in this picture, was when they had war against the kingdom of Epirus, that the Albania. At the time it was Greek Hellenistic kingdom, and these city-states in southern Italy asked this king Pyrrhos from Epirus to help them, and he actually crossed the sea, the Tyrrhenian Sea, with a huge army, even with elephants. All of them were phalanxes with these spikes, a lot of spears. And Romans didn't defeat them, but they caused such heavy casualties, even to Pyrrhus himself, that when they asked him, like, "Hey, king, so what about your victory?" And if I had to experience another victory, that would be my end, because we had such terrible casualties that I would not have any army to keep my power. They fought twice, and Pyrrhus had no other chance, only to withdraw, to znamená stiahnuť sa späť. And that was actually the end of his rule, despite when. That's why we talk about Pyrrhovo víťazstvo, Pyrrhic victory. It means that you probably suffered so much that it didn't give you anything, that actually this victory was your defeat. But later on, we'll talk about elephants again, and especially about the guy who brought it from Africa, from this beautiful city with this excellent port, with a very unique port of a circle in the middle, and that is the city of Carthage, or Carthage. And we talk about Punic Wars. 3 Punic Wars in which Hamilcar Barcas and Hannibal, very famous, legendary commander, and even Hasdrubal actually failed in chances to fight Romans, challenge them, and how the wars ended up, I shall speak next lesson, next time, guys. Okay, even about Gracchi brothers and uprising rebellions of slaves in Sicily. We talk about servile wars, vojny, alebo trockárske vojny, u nich nazývajú sa služobnícke vojny. And the third war is well known like the Spartacus war or gladiator war or Spartacus uprising, with all these things in here about gladiators and so on. Okay guys, so I believe that is the end from my lesson. Dobre, mám poslednú minútku, takže ďakujem vám za pozornosť. Ako som vám už hovoril, takže je možné, že budúce hodiny niektoré triedy, možno viaceré, uvidíme, budete mať teda aj s praktikantom, vysokoškolským študentom, ktorý si robí prax, takže uvidíme, akú formu. Možno, že mu dáme nejakú jeho verziu, ako by si on predstavoval. No a nezabudnite ďalej teda pracovať na zadaniach. Termín máme určený do konca februára, takže po týchto hodinách máte jarné prázdniny, potom už len týždeň. Čiže dobre si to rozložte, aby ste stihli aj oddychovať, už trošku si oddychnúť a aby ste to mali všetko v pohode. Ďakujem, to je z mojej strany všetko. Prajem vám pekný deň. Stay positive in mind and negative in tests. Bye bye.